This is NTV.
It is 5 minutes past 8 o'clock, and under 8 hours ago, the Supreme Court spoke and Judgment Day was expected. It has come, and now developments are moving on to what is expected after they upheld the declaration of William Ruto as the president-elect.
William Ruto is indeed the fifth. Next, all eyes on Tuesday next week when he and his deputy will be sworn in. But something else that caught the eye of many happened today, Mark. President Uhuru Kenyatta broke his silence.
Everyone was asking, where is President Uhuru Kenyatta? In fact, the president-elect William Ruto did say that they hadn't spoken for about 3 months, and he was planning to give him a call. And as everyone was waiting, in the last 1 hour, President Uhuru Kenyatta has spoken.
Let's listen in to what he had to say.
Fellow Kenyans, on the 9th of August of 2022, Kenyans participated in an election that ushered in new leaders at all levels of our governance realm. Following a dispute in the presidential election, a petition was filed in our Supreme Court for determination of validity of the results, and the Supreme Court has today pronounced itself on this matter. When I was sworn in as your president, I made a pledge to the country. A pledge to uphold the rule of law and the decisions made by the judiciary on all matters appertaining to our governance. Today, the Supreme Court made a ruling on the presidential dispute, upholding the results announced by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission on the 15th of August, 2022. And in keeping to the pledge that I made to uphold the rule of law when I took the oath of office, I commit to executing the orders of this court to the letter. The process of handing over is in progress through the Assumption of Office Committee, which actually has already begun its work as of August 10th, 2022. And indeed, it is my intention to oversee a smooth transition to the next administration, and all the necessary orders to facilitate this process have already been issued. And because democracy is a work in progress, I urge the country to respect the institutions that midwife our new leaders. And in doing so, I also urge citizens to constantly put them under scrutiny, for this is the civic duty of every single Kenyan. In particular, this civic duty requires every citizen to constantly put the truth presented by our constitutional institutions to test. And they must test them for coherence, but also for correspondence. They must constantly scrutinize the coherence of the truth given by these institutions and to ask themselves whether the truth has been coherent from one election to another. Has there been a consistent pattern that is acceptable to our democratic ethos? We must ask ourselves, is it about numbers or is it about process? Which of these two is it? And can our institutions rule one way in one election and another way in another election without scrutiny? I do invite you, Kenyans, to keep vigil and indeed to hold all institutions to account. The second thing we must place under scrutiny is whether the truth given by institutions has correspondence. That is, do the truths given by our institutions correspond with what is observable by the citizen? True beliefs and true judgments must correspond to the actual state of affairs. But do our constitutional institutions meet this threshold? While we must appreciate these institutions, we must also hold them to account at every juncture. And their truth has to be consistent and coherent. This is the only way we will build our democracy. I want to take this opportunity to thank every single Kenyan for holding a peaceful election. And for this, I want to thank God, and I want to thank our political parties, but I also want to thank every single individual Kenyan for bringing us thus far. I want to wish well all who have won as they guide our country into the future. And I thank you all for the opportunity to serve, and I say, may God bless you all, and may God bless this great Republic of Kenya. Asante.
That was a national address by the President Uhuru Kenyatta, and this is breaking the silence after what has been quite a period of not directly speaking to the political ongoings in the country. So why don't we just break this down, as well as the events of the day, the Judgment Day, as many people have called it, with two great legal minds. And we have Professor Migai Akech, a public international trade lawyer, and Professor Ben Sihanya, a constitutional lawyer, and we were with him in the chilly Bomas, and today we are trying to keep it AC because it's quite warm in studio. Karibuni, gentlemen, this evening.
Pleasure, viewers.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We've just listened in to President Uhuru Kenyatta's speech. As Mark alluded to, we have not heard the President speak for several days now, and he's finally broken his silence. He did not directly congratulate President-elect William Ruto. He didn't mention his name either. He urged Kenyans to test the constitutional institutions for their coherence, but he also did say that he will oversee a smooth transition. Professor Migai, I'll begin with you. What is your reaction to President Uhuru Kenyatta's speech?
A very cryptic speech, I might add. He mentioned the word truth quite a number of times, and scrutiny, and holding institutions to account, and asking whether the truths have correspondence, whether they correspond with what is observable by the citizens. It seems to me that he does not agree with the decision of the Supreme Court. Quite clearly, he doesn't seem to agree with the decision of the Supreme Court, and he seems to be hinting that the Supreme Court has not been coherent, not been consistent. And I think he's comparing it to the outcome of the Raila petition in 2017.
Right.
Which is quite, it's very cryptic in many ways.
All right, Prof, do you agree with those sentiments?
Yes, and there's a context to it. I think that speech, I think, is the most appropriate in the circumstances. We have come through a very difficult period. Three main reasons. One is the question for the quest for electoral justice in this country, which has a history of the late 60s, but those who want to put it a more recent timeline, give it to when we had the Mlolongo in '88, or when KANU became the constitutionally and as a matter of fact the only party in Kenya for '82. But some would say, particularly from '88 Mlolongo elections, and Kenyans have really engaged this issue. And when we got to 2010, that was the culmination of what was the dreams of many of us. Many Kenyans, people lost lives. Yeah. So so then we had 2013, which was the main test for this constitution, the new electoral dispensation and then the unanimous court actually even started that with that as the preamble of these constitutional electoral reforms. Then we had 2013, so we had 2017 twice, election twice, and also petition twice. Yeah. You had Raila 2017, then you had the John Harun Mwau after that. And I think, secondly, is that if he's talking about truth and he's talking about coherence, because truth was also, substantive truth was also the language of the respondent's lawyer, William Ruto's lawyer, was that we are looking for substantive truth. So I think that President Kenyatta is also referring to that. Because in any objective assessment, if you compared Raila 2017 to Raila 2022, as I have argued in this studio that 2022 was the clearest case you can ever get in an presidential election petition. Because I was involved in both, and I study this and I teach this. It's not because I heard about it, or I used all the 5 senses in both these cases, and more. And this was the clearest. And many serious lawyers say that if you couldn't invalidate this, what else can you invalidate? Are we going back to the situation whereby 07 happened because actually you know that in 07 nobody could trust the courts. Really. So people say, why go to court? After that, after 2013, people also said, can we really go back to court? But later on, 2017, of course, people went to court and the court did what it did. The last is about institutions. So he's talking about truth, coherence, institutions. And therefore, if the court, Maraga court, could invalidate his own declaration of President Kenyatta and Ruto in 2017, I think that any sensible person would say that, why not this? Lastly is about the question of are they being coherent, really? If you read those decisions, and we're likely to go back to this, were they coherent on the question of substantive law on constitutional provisions on elections, on evidence and process? Even coherence in terms of the questions they asked. Because in the morning we were debating this. Based on the pleadings by all the parties, based on the evidence and submissions, and based on the questions the judges asked, was their decision coherent? No. Because they were also, the questions they asked led to this idea that really IEBC was not working as an institution. Then how you then find that IEBC somehow still worked fine, and election is not just that event of that declaration, election is the whole process. How the Supreme Court also didn't mention even 27 counties, 27 constituencies, which there was an admission they were not telling and verified. It's not easy to see coherence here.
All right. They did mention the context at which the declaration was made at that point, and they did acknowledge the divisions there but did say that given the context, they were not convinced that he was out of his place in the declaration, that is IEBC chair. But first things first, just to respond, because you've given us a good history of where we've come from Lolong and what have you, but with what the president has said in the last hour, Prof. Akech says quite cryptic. Do you see this as President Uhuru Kenyatta disagreeing or disowning, or just saying he doesn't agree with what the Supreme Court has arrived at today?
I think, you know, my assessment, my reading of President Kenyatta, especially since 2013, but particularly probably since 2017, has been that what he's been saying, that he wanted a situation whereby he hands over power in a democratic process, and he's got the duty to do it anyway. But he's saying that, of course I'll do it, but I think that cryptic statement is saying that, but surely are our institutions serving us right? I think surely. Is it the kind of situation which can help this country move forward as a con democracy? I prefer calling it con democracy, con for constitutional democracy, a democracy being sensitive to the people, what the people want, but also being sensitive to the rules of the constitution. Is this, if our institutions are not being coherent, and there's some doubt on whether the truth is being pursued, of course I'm saying I'm going to hand over power, of course. But we have issues to deal with probably moving into the future. And please, for the avoidance of doubt, many of us, Raila and Martha Karua, many of us have said, we have to accept the decision of the court.
But you don't agree.
But we don't agree.
Okay.
A bit. That 9-0, in fact, some of it was like even the language was sometimes sounding like Madarau. So, but we want to build a country whereby institutions work, and for the avoidance of doubt, I mean, like even those personal attacks on these young lawyers, for no good reason. I think as this court had developed into a more sensible, responsible court, that if the Supreme Court doesn't just use language to attack anybody lightly.
Okay, I just want to bring in Professor Akech. At some points during this statement or conversation with Professor Sihani, I see you sort of smiling, shaking your head a little bit. Does that mean, are there areas that he's talking to that you are in disagreement with?
With all of what he's saying.
Okay, tell us why.
Yes. First of all, even before the Supreme Court made the decision today, I had said that there were two scenarios that were likely. First, and which was more likely to me, and which is what has transpired, was that the court would uphold the election, acknowledging that there were errors, but saying that they did not affect the outcome, and also giving directions on how the IEBC should work as a commission. And that is precisely what the court did. And I'm not surprised, because reading it, I've always felt that the petitioners did not present a credible case. They just didn't have the evidence when you look at it. And listening to the court today, the court kept saying no credible evidence was provided. For example, that anyone accessed the results transmission system, no credible evidence that the postponement of the elections had any impact, no credible evidence, no significant differences between the forms that were uploaded and delivered at Bomas, the registry report confirming the authenticity of the forms 34As, the numbers adding up in terms of meeting the 50% plus one threshold. And I don't think the petitioners helped their case with the kinds of affidavits they submitted to the court. And I think the court gives very good guidance in terms of how they should have gone about it. They didn't. So to come now and blame the court, I think we are not being honest with ourselves.
Okay.
We have to trust that these judges, and what surprised me is that they gave us a unanimous verdict. I thought it probably would be a majority decision, but and this has tended to be a very cohesive court since Martha Koome took over. It's tended to be a very cohesive court, and I think they take their work seriously. They deliberated on these issues, so when they come back to us with these decisions, and looking at it also as a reasonable observer, as a Kenyan, because the test really has to be that if you look at the 2022 elections in its entirety, would a reasonable Kenyan say that this election was absolutely not credible? That it is an election that ought to have been invalidated? My answer to that would be no. Because much of the process worked very well. It's only at the tail end that there was some disagreement among the commissioners. So should we then overturn the will of the people just because commissioners agreed at the end of the process?
Right.
And that is precisely what the court was saying.
Gentlemen, professors, you both wear glasses, so I'll ask this question in this way. Are we to see what the president has just said through the lenses of someone who supported the main petitioner, or through the lenses of a president, or through the lenses of someone who has been through this process before, and actually contrasting the two experiences? And I'll throw this to Professor Sihanya.
Yeah, I think let me dispose of this matter before. You know, it's easy to sit here in a studio and say the evidence was not there, etc., etc., etc. Without, and you know, you can be at liberty to say that without being specific. But since I started serious litigation, I've been more careful of what I say, as opposed to be from the academy or from a studio. What more evidence, if Form 34A, a good example, is that the counsel for the respondents are saying, please, that Form 34A, which is in the portal, which was live in the portal, in a court, demonstrated by Advocate Julie Soweto, the counsel is saying, please ignore it. That one is in the portal, but ignore it, because it is now disclosing Jose.
But what the Supreme Court, and you say you have been looking at litigation through your career and by your title professor, duly so. But in number 2 here, the second issue, the Supreme Court says there is no credible evidence that there was any tampering with the uploading of Form 34A to the public portal. So it's about the evidence.
Take that as an example. If the IEBC and the respondents, other respondents, advocates are saying, oh, do you know what? That Form 34A, which is in the portal, ignore it. And yet from the word go, and they have been consistent, that the portal has the truth. And that is what you should need to tell, and that's the same as the hard copies. And then at the end of the day, in court demonstrated. And I think so that's why I mean, so that here, talking about, for example, the court saying that what Advocate Julie Soweto gave was hot air, that there was no evidence. Many times by the way, when the courts want to dismiss a matter, they say there isn't sufficient evidence. Even when it's demonstrated to them. Server not opened. Smartmatica itself writing that we are not going to open those because, and then we are being told that it was actually opened. But all the people, agents who are there are saying it's not open. And Smartmatica have written that we are not opening. What more evidence are we talking about? What is this thing called evidence? Evidence is perceived by the five senses, and it can be testimonial or verbal, it can be documentary, or can be physical things, etc., etc. And those were there. So I think that with due respect, when we say there was no evidence, let's just go through that and let's go. Oh, by the way, I know many academics don't even look at affidavits. If you didn't want, if you need to know, I think I need to tell you that.
But
many,
I believe. Prof.
Yeah. Many, they don't even look at those. Just a second.
Go ahead.
Just a second. The last one is 50% plus 1. 50% plus 1 is about turnout. And then IBC said in court that, you know what, 50% plus 1 and related to turnout, we are going to check only what came from a specific Kim's kit, and that turnout in any case is not a basis for deciding an election, and yet it is what is required. Turnout is actually votes cast, and it can be valid votes cast as required under the 1969 constitution was valid votes cast, 2010 constitution is votes cast, and there's been a debate on that. So I think let's not just, I think you had asked me a question about whose lenses was the president looking at. I think, is he looking at it from as a supporter of one of the parties in the electoral process, or as an outgoing president who wants to hand over? From the points that he's been making over time is that he was saying he wants to hand over properly to the person who is elected, and that many people have difficulties with these elections. In fact, even the court told us that, you know what, we want to give Kenyans, which I think lulled many Kenyans, and we want to give Kenyans what is consistent with constitutional democracy and what is good for the country to bring the country forward.
We've soon got to take a break, but Professor Akech, please interject. You wanted to respond to Professor.
Yes, first of all, I do practice law and I read affidavits.
Yes.
And more importantly, I read all the affidavits in this case. They were available publicly well before the court made its determination, and I affirmed the opinion that they were not credible. Hence my calling it and saying that this petition was likely to only turn one way. Number two, if you recall, if you're watching the proceedings of the Supreme Court, the IBC gave a rejoinder to the claim that the Gasharaigo form was doctored. They presented the original.
Yes.
They presented the hard copy of the form, and above all, the numbers tallied. There was no discrepancy between the form that was in the portal in terms of the numbers and the physical form that was presented. And number two, in terms of the numbers, I was listening very, very carefully to the court on the turnout. And the court was saying that the formula was predicated, the 50% plus 1 was predicated on voter turnout generated through the Kim's kit and then generated through manual voting. And as far as the court was concerned, the numbers added up.
Right.
I think we should believe the court.
All right.
But sorry, just a second. The numbers issue, the problem with that specific 34A, which Advocate Julie Soweto demonstrated, the main issue wasn't really so much the numbers. The main issue is where is this name Jose Camargo coming in? And he was not expected to interact with these forms. He was supposed to be an ICT person, etc., etc. Of course, there was no clear contract between him and there's a DCI report on
his
this.
Name
DCI report is evidence. DCI report is evidence.
But
if anybody read them.
But in the cross-examination of that, the CJ did say that in this particular case, there's no man in the middle. That was brought up.
But did you see the name Jose Camargo there? Did you just see the name?
And in the respondents,
on the form.
Yes.
To be fair to the IBC, the name was not on the form.
Because they brought the original.
Precisely.
Yes.
Okay, we've got to take a break. There's still so much more to discuss, and we'll continue with the conversation when we return. Do stay with us. You're watching NTV. We're taking a quick breather. More when we return.
This line is not going down, and you're burning up. But I'll sort you out, my friend. See that barrier? Go for it. Yeah.
Bing bang bing.
Send money for free on Airtel to Airtel. Dial star 334 hash. Make Chaguo smarter on voice, data, and now on Airtel Money. Airtel, the most affordable network.
When seconds count, experience makes the difference. The Nairobi Hospital Accident and Emergency Center is situated in close proximity to the laboratory, radiology theaters, labor ward, cardiac catheterization lab, and the critical care units. With a network of labs, you are guaranteed of accurate medical test results. The Nairobi Hospital is a center of renal excellence, providing cutting-edge technology through more than 10 dialysis machines. As a patient, you are certain to get quality medicine at the best possible prices at our fully stocked pharmacies.
This just in. Demonstrations have erupted countrywide. The demos, dubbed Kitoweo protests, are as a result of Kenyan homes incorporating even more ugali into their meals, thanks to the delicious taste of Tupika sifted maize meal. But if you ask me, itabidi wazoe. Try the tasty, nutritious Tupika sifted maize meal, now available near you. Ugali ni Tupike.
How do you keep your toilets clean?
I use normal detergent and bleach for washing.
The detergent and bleach cleanless can leave behind yellowness, rust, and germs. Harpic's 10 times better cleaning compared to regular detergents and bleach, and kills 99.9% illness-causing germs in your toilet, including the COVID-19 virus.
This is NTV.
And on Judgment Day, there are some quite strong words that were used in the judgment. And just to put it to our panelists here as we continue with the conversation and reactions to the judgment by the Supreme Court, and Professor Migaya Ketch, Professor Ben Sihanya still here with us, adjectives like red herring, hot air, wild goose chase, last-minute boardroom raptures, and quorum antiques. And this is in a anonymous, actually a more decision that was everyone had shared the decision in the 7-judge bench, which you thought would be majority. Do you agree with these adjectives that were used by the CJ in the decision?
And like my friend Ben, yes, I do. I think particularly on the affidavit by Arnold Ocheng and Celestine Opio, the court saying that they were sensational, inadmissible, and not acceptable, and that no agent saw any affidavit. The court was basically telling Arnold Ocheng that as an advocate,
yes,
you should not swear an affidavit, or as we say technically, you should not depend on matters that are not within your knowledge.
Right.
And I'd like to believe that these 7 judges are reasonable. If they found cause to make that determination, then they did. I think we should believe them.
Right.
Yes.
And I meant
it's
to
their
use,
assessment. It's not our
I meant to use the word unanimous, but it was anonymous in terms of it wasn't quite in any name. But unanimous decision there, and you've spoken to it, Professor Sihanya. The words that are used by the CJ in describing or in making the judgment, hot air, wild goose chase. What's your reaction to this?
I think she was reading, I think with due respect, I think we can't attribute it only to the CJ. Yes. She was reading what she called a unanimous decision, yes. So probably we can't. But the point there is that, you know, I always cite that Karl Marx, trust but verify. Mao Zedong, no research, no right to speak. If Professor Bigaya Ketch was at Bombas, he would know a basic fact which was missing here. So it's always good to be cautious. Advocate Celestine Opio and Advocate Arnold Oging Ochieng, these are well-established advocates in the electoral matters. More seriously, they were verification agents at Bombas. So they were deponing to what they know. And and a basic rule in affidavit is you depone to what that I know to the best of my knowledge, or you can say and information, and you can say and belief, and then you add to the extent that it is to my belief I have grounds for believing. Please, those are the rules of affidavits. Is that okay? Civil procedure rules, as well as the Oaths and Statutory Declarations Act. And I'm telling you that they were agents. They are so basic.
Those are basic.
But so you can't say that they want to deponing to what they don't know, because you don't know, they don't know.
I am saying that is what the court says.
Humility helps.
Not me saying.
Right. Humility helps. When I don't know something as a matter of fact,
it is the court that says.
Just a second, I'm talking. Yeah, so you don't believe everything because somebody has said it.
Ben,
if you need some
down.
little, just a second.
Just calm down.
Just a second.
Okay, finish your point and we'll give you the right to reply.
Right. You know, you don't believe everything because a court has said it, especially on matters of fact. You don't believe even on matters of law. You don't believe everything because somebody else has said it. So I'm just saying here, intellectual humility, intellectual curiosity, Karl Marx, trust but verify, Mao Zedong, no research, no right to speak, dictates, basic rule of evidence, dictates that if I don't know that Arnold was an advocate, I say maybe they were not, but were agents, and they were deponing to what they, 1, knowledge, 2, information, 3, belief, and in case it's information and belief, they were citing the basis for that, the ground for that. That is a basic rule of. So I think that on matters of fact, let's just differ a bit. That it's also just humble. It's just nice to say that I don't have all the facts. I would have assessed it.
Okay, at that point, let's give Professor Akech the right to reply to that, and then I'll go into the next question.
I read those affidavits, like I told my good friend here, Ben. I read those affidavits, and I didn't believe them. And I'm not surprised that the court took the view that it did.
Right.
Yeah. In my honest opinion, I don't think the petitioners presented a case that could have overturned this election.
Okay. All right. Well, this is first time lucky for President-elect William Ruto, but 5th time unlucky for Raila Odinga. We know what is next for Ruto. He is going to be sworn in as the next president of Kenya. But what next for Raila Odinga? Might we see him in the opposition? Might he retire? What are your thoughts?
My sense is that, and I say this with tremendous respect, is that probably it's time for him to leave the stage and groom his successors. Mm-hmm. I think the time has come. This, for me, was his final stab, but the presidency did not work. I think it's just time for him to exit the stage.
All right, and Professor Sihanya?
My understanding of politics is that the right time is many times decided principally by the people, and also, of course, the relevant individual. President Jomo Kenyatta arrived in the presidency at the tender age of 75. President Biden is at the tender age of, during his first term of the presidency. Is he around 70? Is it around 70? Is it 77, 78? President Trump's first term was also in the 70s. President Reagan, etc., etc. You know, this is mainly an issue about what do you have the confidence of your political party, your coalition. Do you have the confidence of yourself and your family that, you know, this is still the right thing to do, and if the country and the people need you, it's not something that you sit in the studio and say, please, groom others. Grooming and mentoring is a continuous process. It's not, and as many times also, as they say, but grooming and mentoring is important, and I do mentoring in terms of leadership succession, especially intellectual matters. But it's not something that now, have it, I'm gone. I don't think that's also a reckless way of doing handing over and grooming. So I would not speak for him on that. I think my assessment is that
we still have more to see from
the coalition needs him, the Azimio needs him,
but what sort of...
the ODM needs him, and it's one for this, for political, and the movement needs him.
So and opposition leader?
And on that question, I mean, what sort of an opposition leader would he make? Because Raila Odinga was in the opposition when Uhuru and Ruto were, well, Uhuru still is, you know, they are still president and deputy president, but we would refer to him as opposition leader, and slowly that morphed into ODM party leader, because he was a very, very weak opposition leader at some point anyway.
Let me ask you, what is your sense of opposition leader?
Someone who keeps the
but constitutionally and politically those things are different.
But would you say since 2018,
constitutionally there's no office, constitutionally there's no office called opposition leader? I hope we are together.
Okay. But politically, let's speak about what we know as opposition. I mean, this can be semantics here, and I definitely won't get into an argument with you on what it means in law. You're a professor. Yeah. But politically, we do know what an opposition leader portends or means.
Yes.
So do you see that being the position that he assumes moving forward?
And if so, what kind of an opposition leader would he make?
Well, you know, I think I know that he issued both Raila and Martha Karua, Honorable, they both issued statements, and the summary of it was they said that
we will be communicating,
we are consulting
in the near
and we'll
future
communicate to the movement the next decisions. Who am I on this matter?
Right,
a con professor is preempting what they are thinking through this.
All right.
No.
Yeah, so I would say that on that issue, what role Raila will play, what role Martha Karua will play, and how they will execute that role is a matter that is way, as you know, is way beyond my job group. Yeah. Okay. But what I know is what I know is for a fact, and in terms of con democracy, is that the movement, the progressive movement, still needs both of them, and they have a record.
All right. I mean, and the president-elect has spoken. He says there's nothing like, you know, a handshake in his view, and he believes in an opposition, and so he is definitely moving forward. But let's speak to this. It wasn't direct. The president did not say directly a congratulatory message to the president-elect. He said to everyone who won. In your view, did this sit right with you, Professor Akech?
I think you have to look at it from the perspective of the outgoing president, and I think we all know that at some point the relationship between the two soured.
Yes.
So does this come as a surprise? Hardly. And let's face it, the outgoing president had a preferred successor.
Right.
It didn't pan out that way.
Okay, and to you, Professor Sihanya, how does that sit with you that he didn't, you know, say directly to President-elect William Ruto, congratulations? You know,
I cannot easily comment on the deep politics of it. I think we've commented on the language he used and the meaning in its context. I think relating it to especially the electoral process, the role of IEBC, the transition issues, including, of course, role of IEBC and also the Supreme Court decision. I think that's what we have commented on. The meaning or otherwise of him not saying directly congratulations is something I cannot easily comment on, because this country needed a lot of healing. This country needed a lot of certainty moving forward. We have gone through a very, very difficult electoral process, right, with a lot of threats, a lot of serious allegations of electoral fraud. And by the way, let's take it this way, that even in many countries, it's not just the sitting government that is many times taken to be oppressive or to be capable of electoral malpractices. Trump and others have taught us that you can, in 2016, that you can come from the opposition, what he was regarded as opposition, and really disrupt the electoral process. So the context here has been a very difficult one. Okay. There was the context of the BBI issues, which was supposed to bring shared prosperity, and there was the debate on that. There has been a difficult electoral process with threats here and there in, and I don't know, and name calling, and I think that even from the other side, he was being called names and being told very difficult. I don't know why then how he would interpret that in terms of saying congratulated, especially in light of his speech. Okay. And the context where we are coming from.
At least it is clear that he has said that he will facilitate a smooth transition.
Which is a constitutional and statutory, which is what the main thing really is.
What matters.
Because I think, in these political and governance processes, we don't have to be lovers. We don't have to be buddies. Okay. I think provided we follow control processes and we look for the real constitutional truth, a constitutional, institutional coherence, and etc., etc., those are that, and integrity of processes. That's the main thing that we need to be looking at.
Okay. Right. There is still so much more to discuss. We've got to take another break, but we will come back with this conversation during our 9 p.m. broadcast. So, gentlemen, stay right where you are. And you, the viewer, don't go far. We'll be back after this commercial break at the top of the hour with all the news of the day and much more, plus continuation of this discussion. Stay with us.